You're listening to the Hella Well with Danielle show, a podcast taking women of color on a journey exploring all things wellness and travel related. We're all about showing you how to put on your oxygen mask first and creating lasting self-care habits that will free you to travel the world and live the life you truly desire, and not one you have to fake loving. I'm your host, Danielle Washington. Now let's buckle up and start this journey. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Hella Well with Danielle podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Washington, and today we are talking everything about decolonizing wellness. And you know me, if you've been listening to us for a while, I love a good Webster dictionary. So I want a definition. So I wanted to even start off with a definition of what colonization is, so you understand what we're talking about. You know, colonization is considered the act of appropriating a place or domain for one's use. And, you know, when people talk about decolonization wellness, because it is a hot topic, you know, people think about it in many different ways. Think about, the colonization of how we think about our bodies and what is beauty and all these different things. Today, what I'm talking about with my guest, Dalia Kinsey, is basically dismantling oppression in wellness, because it is real. It is hard for you to get this feeling of feeling well and to feel like you can heal when you feel like you're not on the same even playing field, when people aren't taking into consideration the biases and the privileges that they have. And I love that, Dalia is this queer Black registered dietitian. She's the creator of the Black Liberation of All podcast and the author of Decolonizing Wellness, a QTBIPOC-Centered guide to escape the diet trap, heal your self-image, and achieve body liberation. This is a conversation we need to have. And it's a huge part of why I started this podcast. This podcast is a wellness revolution to recognize for women of color to realize that we're at war. Our self-care and our well-being is at war. And it's even more at war when we're trying to, fight against it in a system that's still fighting against us. And that shit don't feel right. So stay tuned, sit down, relax, and get this information, because it takes all of us to make this change. The wellness industry is a $4 trillion industry globally. And it will take all of us to stand up and speak out and be heard to make sure that we're making these changes so we can get the healing that we need in this industry. So, hey, Dalia, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Excellent. Really happy to be here.
Oh, me too, girl. When I was thinking about having this topic, I was like, yo. And I knew that you had your upcoming book, Decolonizing Wellness, coming up soon. I was like, she has to be on this show because this topic is so important. And to me, I feel like, last year, you had, all the protests and, and if people were like, oh, we love Black people and we're going to do better, especially in the wellness industry. 2020 came around. It's like crickets. And I feel like people aren't really having this conversation, which is why I wanted to have it with you. And I just want to get started. What does decolonizing wellness mean to you?
To me, it means decentering whiteness in wellness spaces. It also means reclaiming what is ours from a cultural perspective, from an indigenous perspective. What types of healing practices were typical among people living in West Africa prior to being kidnapped and dragged over here, and also finding ways to make sure that our voice is actually heard when we're in westernized healing spaces. So the issue is twofold. We live under so much stress because of systemic oppression, which up until 2020, everybody was telling us wasn't real.
Right.
And again, that's going to start again. We know it's coming. We know people are going to say, but there were marches and the Trump administration ended, so racism has been solved. People keep thinking that's how that works, right?
Right.
And in addition to overt racism affecting us when it comes to housing, when it comes to job opportunities, so many different ways that sometimes you can't even perceive because we don't have access to the information to know how much the system is working against us. But now, thanks to people speaking up for themselves more, advocating for themselves more, and there being more interest in covering these types of issues, we're starting to see how deep it actually goes. And that you think you're being compensated well, but are you? Would you be getting 4 times as much money if you were cisgender white male? Probably. Like, things are becoming clearer and clearer that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that makes us vulnerable to stress because of where we end up living and because of what situations we end up exposed to in our work life when we're pursuing our education. But on top of that, we have to think about what happens when you actually go and try and get care. Like, how
Yeah.
often have you been to the doctor and they immediately took your symptoms seriously?
I mean, it's funny because you say that as a woman or a woman of color. I always wonder which negative is this doctor playing against? 'Cause, like, I literally hurt my hand recently. I literally cut my hand, which ended up puncturing a nerve situation. And the doctor looked at me like I was crazy, and I'm like, is it because I'm black, or because I'm a woman that you are like acting like I'm just an idiot?
And that's the thing. When you live at the intersection of multiple marginalized identities, you never know.
You
You
don't.
don't know which one it is. And you also know that if you want to fully be yourself and embrace your identities, you want to embrace both. And the new book is also centered on queer people of color because that's a third layer
Yeah.
that frequently gets ignored. And you go into spaces that maybe you miraculously find a black space that's not misogynistic.
No, I agree with that on
Then,
that one.
right? I mean, the misogyny in the black community is insane. And so many black men refuse to acknowledge that black women are not ever prioritized in these civil rights movements. I was shocked to find out how many black femme presenting people or women have been killed by the police in the last 20 years because I haven't seen any media coverage of it. I genuinely believed that my life was easier than a black man's life because of how it's framed.
Yeah.
So you can be gaslit by the people around you in your community and by media coverage. And then you wonder, am I imagining this? Am I just being difficult? Am I just being a stereotypical angry black woman?
Black woman. Hmm. And like the
It's
funny thing,
really,
go ahead.
it just really feels like being a black woman is a completely different category. Like, it's its own thing.
Because it is.
And even though, right?
It
Is.
literally, I mean, you add in anything else if you're queer or anything else, but like it is. Like the things that we go through, and you talked about it earlier, was I feel like one thing that wellness industry in the wellness space doesn't get and they don't take into consideration is the realities of being a black woman. The realities of being a person of color, indigenous person, a person who is queer. Like it doesn't take into those considerations. Like when I think about wellness and, you know, these things, and like when I first started thinking about self-care, and people were like, self-care, you know, take care of yourself, self-care, self-care, self-care. And I started thinking, you know, back in the day when I kind of had a limited mindset on what self-care looked like, I was like, that's a luxury. You know, I'm freaking working, you know, twice as hard to get half of the pay, get less access, less support. And, you know, you want me to take time. And it wasn't until I started rethinking about what self-care was that I was able to change that aspect of it all. But like, I feel like you have what I've been seeing called like the that girls on TikTok and Instagram talking about, yo, you need to wear these cute little clothes, and you need to have these certain makeup products, and you eat vegan in these ways, and you need to do all these different things. And it's this one basic, mainly white standard what is beauty and what wellness looks like, and this is how you're going to live well. And that was part of the reason why I even created this podcast, and the reason why I created this whole brand was because I'm like, F that. Wellness is not a one size fits all. Wellness is a custom pair of jeans. And I'm tired of this colonization of wellness that says it has to look this certain way that doesn't take in consideration what we've gone through as people of color, and especially Black women in this country. And it pisses me off. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation.
And you can sense when you say the colonization of wellness. Well, what's the purpose of colonizing? It's to exploit, it's to rob people of their riches.
Yeah.
And in many ways and forms, we know it's also meant to take people's lives and monetize their lives. So what we're sensing when we see that really narrow definition of wellness that's presented to us all the time, and that super narrow definition of what does self-care look like, it's meant to be something to make you feel less than, because people who feel less than spend more money. People who feel less than will dedicate their lives to the pursuit of worthiness. And so many people, even with dissatisfaction with their body size, it's about pursuing being worthy of love, worthy of being seen, worthy of being noticed, worthy of affection, worthy of security. It isn't necessarily about the body size.
Yeah.
And that obsessive focus on like control the size of your body and then you will be well. Well, this obviously isn't connected to reality. There are lots of people in large bodies that are very healthy. What seems to be the big determining factor is your emotional state, your stress levels. Systemic oppression is a bigger problem for the Black community than fried food. But to hear other people tell it, oh, it's all about the fried food, or it's because you're in a food desert, it's because of this, it's because of that. I have seen in too many cases, Black folks, other folks of color, gain more resources and lose their well-being more and more and more, because unfortunately, frequently, because of systemic oppression, the more money you make, the less people who are like you'll have the chance to be around in a day. The more people you'll be around that are gonna like microaggression you to pieces whilst telling you they're not a racist, like their uncle is or their great grandma is, but not them. But then you point something out to them that's problematic, that hurt you, and you're a piece of shit, and they fucking tear you a new one, right? And
Right.
then you are the problem because you identified the problematic behavior. They're not the problem. Because it's central to, in my observation, and I've seen other people write on this too, it's such a big part of white American culture to be polite, and that's in air quotes, to be nice, because I think it's not at all nice to undermine people's well-being, to literally...
But they're not even being nice. Let's keep it real. They're being fake as fuck.
That's the standard. So you're bad if you even say how you're really doing when someone says hello. Yeah. Even among other folks from that same dominant cultural group, they get so miffed at each other if someone actually tells them how they're doing.
Exactly. I mean, how dare you say you're grieving and you're depressed and feeling suicidal? Like, I
love
didn't
and light
really want
only.
to know.
Love and light. Love and light. Yeah, and that toxic positivity. And I keep seeing this too in spiritual spaces where people are weaponizing faith or kind of this nebulous new age stuff as well, that like, oh, if you're really spiritual, well, then you are able to love unconditionally. And like when a Klansman spits in your face, you're just going to say love and light and shoot rainbows out your butthole. Like that seems to be
that's the
general
message.
Vibe.
That's the total vibe. And it's like, no, sis, you spit in my face. You may be my first fight I've ever had in my entire life. Don't get it twisted. I may be bougie, but I will fight for those situations. And you bring up a good point because it makes me think about, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I don't know. It's like when I feel like in the wellness industry is when people, and I say people, I guess when I'm saying people, I mean others, mainly white people, will have this too soon closeness, and they'll be like, hey sis and queen, and I don't know if it rubs you the wrong way, but it hella rubs me the wrong way when they're like, it's their way of trying to build community, but hey queen and hey sis and sister, and I'm like, no, you ain't my sister. Like, and I feel like it's an appropriation of a cultural term that I can say to someone else who's of color, because yes, our our families, our ancestors have fought, have been enslaved, and we have a literally kindred sisterhood where I feel like I can look at you and call you my sister, whereas when someone else white does it, it don't feel the same. I don't know what's your take on that?
Yeah, honestly, like we said, being a black woman, it's a thing unto itself because out in the world in general, I've always been, when I was a kid in the 80s, I said I was a tomboy. I never wanted to wear feminine things. But as an adult, in 2021, with the language available, I can see that I'm non binary and more gender fluid. So I don't really use any pronouns at all. And I don't feel strongly connected to femininity as it's usually presented. But I feel so connected to other black women or black femmes that were raised as females because we've been treated differently. We've been treated the same. And it's the whole vibe when we actually connect and knowing that you can tell a black woman what's going on with you and she actually understand it. Like generally
Yeah.
I love to feel connected to all folks of color and all black folks, but in reality, you see people are really all in some bullshit with Bill Cosby is a perfect fucking example of how black women aren't shit in our community.
Yeah.
How women aren't shit. And the homophobia is a whole nother thing. But I don't feel any type of way if a black woman calls me cis. That feels fine. Or even sees me as femme. That doesn't bother me. But when someone else does it, it feels like I'm being punched in the stomach. Because I feel like when a black woman does it, it's an acknowledgement of we
I
share an
see you.
experience
Yeah.
and I see you. Yeah.
And
And when other
I'm
people do it, it feels like they're not seeing me.
exactly, and I love a good definition. I don't know why. Maybe because I loved encyclopedias as a child, but I love definitions. So of course I kind of looked up colonization. I was like, let's see what good old Webster thinks colonization is. And so in the dictionary it says colonization is defined as the act of appropriating a place or domain for one's own use. And the way I feel like we're using it here so people understand what we mean by decolonization of wellness is like it's about identifying and repairing any harm that was caused from wellness practices being appropriated or commodified mainly by whites. And I want to talk about the financial side of things that I don't think everyone also thinks about. You know, we don't have the same access to wealth as white people. Like literally there's a wage gap of, I think the wage gap between black and white Americans, I think it's over 26%. And
And
so
that seems conservative because I'm just now realizing as I move forward in my business
yeah.
what feels like a high price to me. Other people that are walking around saying they're broke, and even I feel like they believe we're in the same social class, we have the same amount of, you know, post
Yeah.
secondary education. They have so much more money than I do because they inherit things from generations during which my ancestors were literally not allowed to own property. So you could have done the
Right.
exact same amount of work, but you were not allowed to own anything. You were not allowed to pass anything on. And I've heard so many stories of people, basically, people could just come along and decide to take your land, which is, par for the course for colonizers. And that happens so many times to people that the wealth gap, it sometimes blows my mind among other people who are saying they're working class or that they're lower middle class.
Yeah, and you think about that, and so there's the wealth gap, and then you think about the cost of wellness. Wellness ain't cheap. Like if you, I mean, wellness is not cheap. And we were talking about before we started this podcast, these yoga pants, like I live in San Francisco and I swear to God, there's this district called the Marina District where that's the uniform. Everyone walks around in their cute little Lululemon, yoga pants and whatever brand it is. And I was like, okay, when I got into yoga, I'm going to buy a pair. Oh my fucking God, these things like $100. I ain't gonna pay $100 for a pair of leggings I get from Forever 21 for $20. I'm like, I don't. It's like, I'm like, y'all have lost your freaking mind. And people don't, in the wellness industry, in these companies, and like the wellness industry globally, I think is $4 trillion, and in the U.S., which is like the largest segment, is like 52 billion or something like that. Like they're pricing us out. They're pricing us out as a
Well, it's not
community.
meant to be accessible.
No,
It's
it's
not
not.
meant to be accessible.
I mean,
But the
Pilates classes are
beauty
20 something
is,
dollars a class. Treatments are stupid
or
expensive.
way more,
Supplements,
yeah.
you look into yoga classes, like all these things are pricing us out. And not even, but they're pricing us out in participating in them. They're pricing us out as practitioners. Like to get certified as like a yoga teacher, nutritionist, or Reiki master, or any of these things. So it's between like $3,000 to like $10,000. And we can't, we want to be in this, we want to show more representation, but we're being priced out.
Well, and I believe it's by design. In
Yeah.
the registered dietitian field, people are constantly saying they want to see the field more diverse. But the fact of the matter is only like 2% of registered dietitians in the United States are black. And that isn't an accident. When I went through my program, it was so chock full of microaggressions. By the time it was done, I was like, I don't even know if I fucking want to do this anymore. So in my case, because of the state that I live in, the lottery funds scholarships and it's based on your grades. So I wasn't paying for this degree. I mean, I was paying for some books here or there, but by comparison, some people spend $40,000, $50,000 on their bachelor's. I spent like 2,000 basically. Money wasn't a barrier. The barrier was the intense amount of racism I had to live through while I was in the program and constantly receiving what was clearly misinformation about why Black Americans aren't thriving and continually being treated like we're one big ass homogenous group when we couldn't be any more fucking distinct. We've always been very distinct, which is partially why it was so easy to convince people to ship people
Yeah.
off into like the depths of hell because people didn't see the folks they were sending as part of them because they're parts of different tribes. They were the losers in conflicts, or it was just a money thing. And again, people didn't see them as part of them. Not that that was a universal truth, because I know there were plenty of people in Africa who started to oppose the transatlantic slave trade long before any colonizer said it was a problem. But that's other suppressed history, right? But when you really look at it, it's by design that people are being left out. Would you go out of your way to include your dog in your wellness plan as a family? If you don't see somebody as an equal, they're an afterthought. And if you can't get that idea out of your mind and out of your body that Black people are not interesting, are not valuable, are not fully human, then of course you're going to keep forgetting about us. You literally can't center us because you think centering Black folks is you being a good person. It isn't intuitive to you. It's something you do in a performative way. Maybe you do it to perform for yourself. Maybe you do it to perform for other people. But to get white supremacy out of your body takes work. And as people of color, it takes work. So if we have internalized messaging that is clearly white supremacist, what is the fucking chance that people who actually can benefit from white supremacy culture didn't internalize it? It doesn't matter if you didn't mean to. It's fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
And when you bring up a good point about the whole, and it makes me think about performative allyship and kind of like, and I don't know if you want to talk about what that is, but I feel like that's what a lot of that, what I saw last year is, a lot of, you know, their companies and that mainly white based companies were like, oh, we love black people, we support you, here's $1. Oh wait, let me feature some black people, some black owned businesses. Hey, we're good. Look, we have a blog post about, these black owned companies. And I think it's such BS, and I think that that's all we're seeing. There's no action behind it. I don't know what your take is on that.
I had so many people reaching out to me wanting to use me as a prop, whether or not that was their conscious intent. That is what it was. And I finally hit my breaking point when I saw how people were being so performative and acting like for the first time they realized that maybe black people were sick of AMC showing Gone with the Wind every 2 fucking minutes. Like maybe we were tired of that. Maybe it's not cute to keep playing these mammy tropes. Maybe it's not good for the psychological health of our children to see Prissy and Mammy. And to see like the Aunt Jemima people act like for the first fucking time they realize like, oh, this trope is outdated. No fucking duh. And you already knew that. And even Amazon with like we're featuring black stories, and it just was so vapid. And that wasn't what anybody asked for.
Exactly.
We still haven't gotten our ask. Oh, can we actually get some equal protection under the law? Hello. Can I be guaranteed that I can go to any city I want and drive and not be afraid of being murdered if I get pulled over? I went to rural Tennessee last week for a retreat and really had to think and look carefully, like, where is it safe for me to go to the bathroom? Because number one, I don't want to go in somewhere and have them tell me the toilet's out of order and then they give somebody white the key. It's happened many times. Yep. Because I get so agitated and so upset, and you feel powerless, and it just like fucks me up for a minute. And then other people will tell you, and by other people I mean people who are not having this type of racialized trauma, will tell you, well, why do you have to internalize that? You know who you are. It doesn't matter. But it does matter if you've been raised with this type of pressure. This is trauma. And you don't just decide to magically make trauma go away. It takes work to get it out of your body. And almost no one is out there trying to give us the support we need to get this racialized trauma out of our body. If up until now everybody said we were in a post-racial society because we had a black president that one time, who was supporting us in managing our racialized stress? Yeah. Literally no one.
And if you think about it, even the programs like the coaching programs aren't taking into consideration those underlying things. They aren't taking into the underlying biases that happen because of racism, because of systematic racism, the things that we go through as people of color. But they're expecting, oh, well, this is going to work for everyone because, I put it out here, hashtag self-care. What are, like, I feel like I've had my own share of like microaggressions that I've dealt with in the wellness industry. Like for me, what I think about are times when I would go to a yoga studio, and of course I'm the only person of color. Maybe there might be an Asian because I live in California. But like what would really piss me off, and that's why I want to kind of see what other microaggressions you've experienced in the wellness industry, is like I'll put my mat down and people will move their mat over, or they see me like, oh, we don't want to sit next to her. I'm like what am I going to do? Like, what do you think I'm literally going to do in this class that's different than you? And that really, it made me feel like I don't want to go to yoga, because I'm like, if it's going to be like this is supposed to be a welcoming space. And let's be real, yoga it was colonized by other people, and it made into this exercise practice when it really is about philosophy. Like, so I don't know, it just pissed me off.
Like a full-blown deeper religious practice.
Yeah, I mean, that's an appropriation of its own. Like, and people don't even think about the appropriations of some of these practices. If you look at, ayahuasca, you look at shamanism and all these different things, where people are coming in and taking these over and calling it wellness and, financially benefiting from it and not respecting the history, the people who are behind these things, which
And
is
in
a
some
whole other
cases,
thing.
monopolizing the medicine so much that the people who've actually been using it for centuries can't even get it anymore.
Yeah.
Like it's a special level of fucked.
It is, and I have to admit my own ignorance in doing some of these things. Like, I've done ayahuasca and not really paying attention, and I do think that's something we do need to think about. It's not just white people, but we also have to take our own role, and how are we, benefiting from the colonization of some of these wellness spiritual practices that are based in other cultures.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And then looking too at, are we learning some sort of really diminished, flattened version of the original practice?
Yes, we are most likely. Well, it depends on
Most likely.
it depends on who's teaching. It depends on the respect of the culture, the respect of the people, and their training. But I gotta believe the answer is still yes most of the time.
Because if you really want to squeeze as much money out of something as possible, you need to simplify it. You need to flatten it out. You need to eliminate the nuance so that you can scale it and make it one size fits all. So if it's really nuanced, like it probably should be, because every one of us is different, how can you scale that? And that's one of the interesting things in general about holistic health practices. Generally, they take a while to work because it's a full blown process and it's about the individual that you're treating. And if you work with a guide or a healer in a lot of cultures, you go and see them all the time, and it's a process. But you can't scale that. So, in some environments, the person who is the healer in the community, that's their full-time thing. People in the community support them, but it's more of a subsistence type of situation, not a you're going to be rolling in resources type of situation.
Yeah.
And to really give people the one-on-one attention that they need, I mean, that makes more sense. But in the world that we live in, that's so centered on making sure you can hoard as much wealth as possible, it's like, where does real wellness get a chance to factor in? And one of the most insidious things about internalized racism or internalized stigma of any kind, it tends to make you want to avoid people that remind you of the ways that you're different from the dominant group. So you've seen this in a lot of people, who don't want to hang out with people that they call ratchet, because they're too loud and they're too culturally distinct. And they basically don't really feel comfortable in community with other Black folks.
Yeah.
But the thing is that healing happens in community. And this is something we almost never see emphasized here in the U.S., because this is not a community-centered culture. It's all about the individual. But in order for us to reverse the damage of all the chronic stress that we're under, we need to be in community with other people that make us feel safe and make us feel seen. And frequently, that's going to be someone else who's going through the same experience as you. Yes, you can find love other places, but I don't ever feel like I can completely relax unless I'm with other people who've been socialized the same way or treated the same way as me.
Yeah.
I know that if I say like, oh my God, I can't believe how everybody's still like listening to R. Kelly,
I didn't know you were about to
I
say R.
feel like
Kelly.
a black woman,
Like I
a
knew it
black
was
woman
coming.
is going to be like, yeah, he's on. So this is some bullshit, right? This is how
I
they
mean,
do
I don't
us. They
listen to
don't give a
R.
shit about
Kelly. I
what
mean, I
happens
didn't
to
really
us.
care for his music in general too much. But after everything that happened, nah, I don't listen. But you bring up a good point, because I think of the flip side of some of these things we're talking about, being a community. I think on the flip side, there's this sometimes this stigmatism in the Black community that, doing yoga, practicing Reiki, you know, um, drinking green smoothies, going vegan, that's a white thing. Oh, what are you doing? That's not for us. And I'm like, that's BS. And so you're like fighting it on both sides. And that's it just it's it becomes exhausting when I'm just trying to take care of
It
me.
is very isolating. Well, and this is the whole thing, and this is something that people who have racialized identities understand. While the dominant culture is treating us like one big ass homogenous group, when we go to seek out community with each other, the truth is instantly revealed,
Yeah.
right? There's all kinds of black people. And a whole lot of them don't want anything to do with me or with you.
Right. Because like, we're too woo woo. And it's the fact
Right.
that they were called woo woo, and especially some of the things that we're doing, it's like it originated in Africa. So I'm confused why you're calling like playing, like not, I was going to say playing with crystals, but using crystals as woo woo when if it's in the Bible and it talks about, crystals right there, but now it's too woo woo or you're
Mm.
not black enough. And it's, you get stuck in this kind of in between. And I agree with you. It is freaking isolating when all I'm trying to do is be a better me.
Yeah. The crazy thing is, only after we work through some, well, we obviously don't have to be completely healed because who's ever going to be that,
We
right?
ain't. No one.
But once you get to the point where you start to feel comfortable enough with yourself to be yourself in a more open way, then your people come to you.
Yeah.
But it's hard to find them when you're out here like trying to think, what can I say that's going to be acceptable, and you know, just going with the flow and trying to fit in. That's the enemy of finding true love and acceptance,
Yeah.
because your people who resonate with you will not recognize you if you are not showing up as your full self. But if you have been beaten for being yourself, if you have been kicked out of your home for being yourself, it's going to be really hard for you to feel safe enough to show up authentically. And
Yep.
that has to be honored and acknowledged, that a lot of us have spent a lot of our lives surviving, and until your survival and your safety is handled, you can't move on to these things that are farther down the road, like healing past trauma or working on self acceptance. You have to get those basic needs handled first.
Yeah.
And so, even when you come into new resources, like you said, those bad experiences you had in yoga, finding a healing space that's for you also requires more energy for us. Unless you get lucky in the first place you go, everybody's welcoming and great. But I know what I've experienced in some yoga settings. Now it's pretty far from my house, but when I do go, I go to it's an actual ashram. And even though these are mostly people of European descent, they're very much into respecting all of the limbs of yoga and
Yeah.
studying all of the limbs. Some of them are out there studying Sanskrit and like really going in, right? And they may be connected with a teacher who actually still lives in India. And there I've found that people will just treat you like a normal human being. But in other studios, one thing that would bother me is when people would keep trying to help me when I didn't say anything that indicated I'd never been to a yoga class before. So that's, to me,
Because they
another form of a
assumed. Yeah.
microaggression, the assumption that I don't know anything and I need guidance, and I probably, wrapped up a bunch of pennies to get my $20 together for the drop it. You know.
I can't.
So
She's like, I wrapped up some pennies. Like, let me go to the grocery store and put it in the coins in the thing so it comes out to $1. Sorry.
exactly. Well, and then I found there were spaces where I felt so lit up that were wellness centered. I said, "What? Well, why would I even go to this other place?" So here in Atlanta, there's multiple schools of African
Oh,
dance,
yeah.
and they're not just like dancing around and pretending. They're actually doing dances that tell stories. These are, elders who really have spent time reconnecting to their roots as close as we can get anyway, right? From the west coast of Africa. They take
And
field trips to
Atlanta
Africa and
has
everything. I
such
haven't
a,
gotten to do that.
Atlanta has such an amazing wellness community for people of color. That's the only thing I even remotely like about Atlanta. Other than that, Atlanta kick rocks. I will never live there. Never. Atlanta has been Taylor
Wait,
Swift
what's
in my
wrong with
world.
Atlanta?
Oh, girl, I can't for so many reasons. I just can't. I mean, I guess you say never, but never. We are never, ever, ever, ever getting together. Like, never. I don't like Atlanta, but I love that they have this beautiful and large wellness community. And I feel it's so embracing. So you don't have to you can avoid some of the microaggressions that we talked about. You can avoid some of the issues and the colonization of wellness to some degree in those spaces. But when you're not in those spaces, like how do you navigate the oppression in the wellness industry?
I know for me, I've gotten to a point where there's some spaces you just can't pay me to go into.
Right.
And yeah, that's really what it boils down to. And finding your own way and remembering that so much of our conditioning that makes us feel like we need a guide or a teacher, that's just colonization talking. You know, the patriarchy, there's always got to be someone in charge and everybody else is underneath. You always have to have a formal instructor. Lived experience isn't shit according to the colonizer, right? So you have to have something in a written form and you have to have that teacher come in and teach you how to do things. When in reality, in so many cases, the more you meddle and the more you intervene, the more drama and unnecessary confusion you cause in your own wellness. So many times, what we really need is time and quiet, time to really connect with our own thoughts. Why should we get a meditation instructor if we don't want to? If that calls to you, great. But if not, why would you need a guide to know how to sit with your thoughts? It's not about trying to stop your thoughts. It's just about learning to observe them. There's a
Yeah.
million different ways you can meditate. And what makes so many of us uncomfortable because we've been conditioned to think we must behave the right way for our own safety so that we are able to keep a roof over our heads and not get fired, so that we're able to like be assimilated enough not to draw negative attention and have the cops called on us. We really struggle with the concept of there's no right way. Any way you do it is right. If it's right for you, it's right.
Yeah.
And if you try something and it doesn't work, you can change it. So you don't necessarily need a guide. A guide is nice. A guide who really is listening to you and reflecting your own thoughts back to you can really accelerate your growth. But you don't need a guide because you are not broken and you don't need fixing. Listening to your own body, your own intuition, and your own cravings is the answer.
Period. Like I literally can't say anything else but period on that one. Do you have like any other last minute thoughts on this topic that you like, yo, y'all need to make sure you know this and make sure that you're like just guidance of how to, what actions we can take as people of color in dealing with this and how can we promote the decolonization of wellness?
I think the biggest thing for me is looking at the things in your life that make you feel good and make you feel connected and acknowledging that that is wellness. Whether that's how you feel when you're eating a family dinner at your grandma's and people are really listening to you and you feel heard, whether that's time you spend in your faith community where you feel connected and like you're fully present, or whether that's the time you spend playing in the front yard with your partner, with your kids, that is wellness. You don't have to spend a dime to focus on your wellness. Anything that makes you feel whole and present and uplifted is for your highest good.
You don't have to spend a dime. Don't listen to the hype. Yo. Oh my God, I so thank you. I know you have a book coming out. Can you want to explain a little bit more about when it's coming out? What's the title and where can we get it?
Yes, it's Decolonizing Wellness, a QT BIPOC-Centered guide. And the title's a little long, so don't worry. My name is going to be on it, and the link will be in the show notes.
Yes.
I'm so excited about it because I feel like, I know this sounds a little cheesy, but I feel like I channeled it and that people really need this. And it's just a stepping stone to fully understanding that you have the answers and you have the power to heal your own life, to heal your relationship with your body image and with food in general. So it's all about reconnecting to your body and remembering that you only exist because you come from a long line of survivors that also lived in wise bodies. And let's not discount their lived experience and all the genetic wisdom they passed on to you just because we've been socialized to think we're never right. Our hair is too curly, our skin's too brown. We're always wrong. That's the story. But that's bullshit. And you are wonderful in so many ways. And it's most important that you know that and you understand that. So the book is really about remembering that you are
Oh, sure.
whole, you are a complete person, and you're valuable no matter what the people around you say.
Ashe to that. Oh my God. So yes, the notes in the notes, all the information on that, so you guys can get the book. My God, I love you. I just appreciate the work that you're doing. I feel just so honored to have been connected with you through your Black Joy Summit that you had last year. I just keep doing what you're doing because it takes one person to motivate another, to motivate another, to motivate another to create a movement. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're doing with this podcast. That's what you're doing. And so I appreciate and honor you for being here and everything that you are.
Oh, and thank you for using your voice to talk about things that need to be said.
Love Fest. So at the end of every podcast, I always ask a couple of quick fire questions, nothing crazy. So whatever comes to mind, just go with it. So my first question is, what does living hella well mean to you?
Mm. Lots of rest and giving myself permission to just exist.
Oh, I love that one. Aisle or window?
Aisle. I get so freaked out looking out the window.
Really?
And
Oh,
then
I
it's
mean,
easier to get to the bathroom when you're in the aisle.
that's true. Like if I feel like I'm going to be going to the bathroom a lot or I need to get out of this plane quick as possible, I'm definitely the aisle chick. But if I know it's going to be a long ass flight and I don't plan on getting up anytime soon and I don't want to be messing with people, I don't want anyone bumping me because I kind of get annoyed when people bumping me, and then I'm
Mm.
definitely a window girl. So yes, what's always in your travel bag?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm so bad at packing. I'm always forgetting things. So it's like, is anything definitely in there? Probably not. I usually try and remember earplugs
Okay.
because sleep is, you see there's a recurring theme here. Sleep is so important to me. Earplugs, when you don't have them, it's a real problem. You never
Yeah.
know what you're going to encounter when you travel.
Facts, facts, facts. When is the first time that you knew you were black?
Mm. Hmm. I want to say kindergarten,
Okay.
like orientation. My parents did raise me in a really multiracial church, but no one really acknowledged skin color that I remember when I was that small. And it was probably orientation, not even the first day of school, when I noticed how the parents were fawning over the very fair skinned biracial students
Mm.
and at least acknowledging the white students. And the black kids who were darker were all invisible, myself included. And I thought, what is this?
Yep. Realization of all that. My last question is, this whole podcast is about creating a wellness revolution, to get women of color to thrive and not just survive. What advice would you give to your younger self in trying to uphold that thought process and thriving and not just surviving?
I think I would really just stress that how you feel is the most important thing, not how you're perceived by others, and go for the joy. And you're not here to entertain anyone else. Beauty is not an obligation. This is about you and how you feel.
I love it. This is about you and how you feel. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for just gracing us with your presence, and y'all get the book. Seriously, make sure to follow her. I'll make sure to put all of her social media in there. She's someone you need to follow, someone you guys need to join, and we cannot do this alone. This is a group effort. This is a community effort, because the wellness industry, as big as it is, doesn't have a reason to change unless we tell them and fight for it. So yeah, that's all. All right. We'll see you guys next week. And other than that, talk to you guys later. Ciao.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Hello Well with Danielle show. Make sure to visit our website, hellowellwithdanielle.com, where you can subscribe to our show on iTunes, Spotify, and Amazon Music and never miss an episode. Also, you can follow us on social media at Hello Well with Danielle on Facebook and Instagram, and Hello Well Danny on Twitter. And if you hella love the show and got some good nuggets out of it, know that I'm not too proud to ask for you to please leave a rating or review on iTunes so that we can continue to expand our reach and help other women of color. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you next week. Ciao.